Hello, folks. Welcome to City Thread's Accelerated Mobility Playbook Technical Assistance Grant Informational Webinar. I know folks are still coming in from the waiting room or wherever you were on the internet. So we'll wait another minute or so to get started. For those that are here, if you don't mind, put in your role and where you are tuning in from in the chat. For those that are just coming in, welcome. We are going to get started shortly. We appreciate the time, and please put in your role and where you're tuning in from in the chat so we can get to know each other just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to wait 30 more seconds, and then we are going to get started. Again, welcome to this informational webinar. For folks that are now just coming in, put your name, well, your name will come up when you put it in the chat, but your role, where you're coming from. And for those that have been here now the third time I've said that, appreciate your patience. Okay, Kyle, are you ready to start this thing? Awesome. Well, again, thank you all for joining us. This is a webinar on City Thread's Accelerated Mobility Playbook Technical Assistance Grant. Before we get into the details and information on this grant opportunity, wanted to just introduce ourselves. I'm Sara Studdard, partner at City Thread, joined by Kyle Wagenschutz. Zoe Kirkus is hanging in the wings and will be supporting this webinar, moderating the chat and questions. At City Thread, we believe that people know what is best for their city. All of the folks kind of virtually here included. And we really see that there is an untapped opportunity for local government and community partners to work together to achieve the vision that their neighbors have and that they have for the streets, parks, housing, and more that can work better and connect more of their community. City Thread was started with the knowledge and also the proven approach, which is our accelerated mobility playbook, that cities can move faster while also meeting the needs of residents. From 2018 to 2021, Kyle and I led the Final Mile, a program that asked, why can't cities move faster to deliver the mobility projects that their residents want? And answering that question, we brought resources, strategies, and solutions to 5 US cities and helped them collectively build 335 miles of high quality mobility, biking, walking infrastructure in just 2 years. And our accelerated mobility playbook has captured all of those lessons and learnings, improved some of them, and now is bringing them to cities across the US. Since we launched this grant program, we have worked with participants. You go on to the next slide, Kyle. We've worked with participants in cities from across the country to help them begin to think and actually implement 350 miles of connected, comfortable, and safe sidewalks, bike lanes, side paths, intersections, et cetera, et cetera. We have had now the honor of working with communities that are achieving really high levels of implementation, acceleration, new community partnerships and capacity building that really has never been seen in the US today. And our approach is really, it's not another plan that sits on the shelf. We really believe in laying out how to build stronger relationships that are built on trust and accountability, how to turn existing or even future mobility plans into the streets that meet the needs of all users, that are connected, convenient, and comfortable. And how can we all make the case that investments and then actually building mobility projects is a winning campaign for elected leaders, city staff, and all community members to support. Next slide, Kyle. And so, are you stuck? This is our virtual bingo card. We come from a place that, Kyle is a recovering bureaucrat, me with a lot of experience working on the community side and partnering with city folks. We know that there is not a single reason why our community doesn't necessarily look the way we want to. There's not a single reason why some projects take really slow. And so we just want to kind of name that we see you, we hear you. Kyle and I have both worked on projects when we were both in Memphis, Tennessee, that had all of the right things in place, the funding, the politicians, the community leaders, but still, took over a decade. I didn't have bangs then. So just to say that, we really come from a place of knowledge of sort of what it feels like to be stuck, and are excited to talk about how this grant opportunity can help y'all and your streets get unstuck.
Thanks, Sarah. And we think one of the best ways to tell you about the Accelerated Mobility Playbook is to just describe how it has worked in cities that we've actually worked in. And so on the screen, we just have a slide here sort of showing two cities that were in very different places when we began trying to answer this question about why is it taking so long. We worked in New Orleans, Louisiana, where there was no mobility plan. There was no funding in place. They had a passionate, energetic new mayor who'd been elected, a really effective bicycle advocacy organization, community groups who were really interested in pursuing bicycling and walking as a sort of a healthy lifestyle choice. But there was this real apathy for building the infrastructure that was needed to support a safer network of cycling across the entire city. And almost the polar opposite of that was Austin, Texas. When we started working there, they had a lot of money. They had one of the biggest internal active transportation staffs that we have ever worked with. They had, a supportive mayor, but really sort of differing opinions in terms of the city council about sort of how to prioritize mobility. And really almost no sort of community advocacy support sort of stepping up to celebrate and showcase the progress that the city was making. And both of these cities, starting in very, very different places, were struggling with the ultimate goal of building the infrastructure. It says here that Austin was on a 20-year timeline to finish their planned bicycle plan. They were moving, but they were moving really slow. New Orleans was moving as well, but they didn't even have a plan to understand how fast they were going or where they actually wanted to go. And so we created the Accelerated Mobility Playbook not as a way to circumvent or supersede the existing plans that those communities had in place. We created it to say, you've already done the hard work of planning your bicycle networks, of talking with your residents about, what the future of mobility looks like. But if you don't speed up the implementation, you'll lose all of the momentum around that planning process. If it takes 10 years, if it takes 20 years to begin to sort of really see the tangible outcomes of your planning process, the tangible outcomes of your community feedback and engagement with your partners, it's going to be really hard to sustain that momentum. And none of the people that you're talking with today are going to be able to enjoy or celebrate, the outcomes that you hope to sort of see by investing in transportation, by giving people more options. And so the AMP is simply a way of thinking about an implementation strategy that is bound up and relies on collaboration amongst key community partners. We looked to our elected officials, we looked to the city staff, we looked at sort of all of the range and breadth of people who exist in our community, business owners, residents, neighborhood groups, advocacy organizations, so on and so on, and understand what are the strengths of those relationships and how can we leverage those relationships in a way that lets us actually pursue construction and implementation in a much faster way. How can we take the plans you already have, the momentum and the assets of your community, and organize that into a strategy that focuses on getting projects built and getting them built faster? I think one of the really amazing outcomes from our work in places like New Orleans and like Austin, is that the AMP was a wild success. We were able to sort of think about what are the primary challenges, looking at that bingo card of reasons why cities get stuck, is how do we identify what the bingo card looks like in each of these individual communities? Because they're all a little bit different, they're all a little bit the same. What are the overarching strategies that we can develop to help overcome the most significant challenges that are delaying progress? Whether that is, thinking about a media environment that constantly talks about the negative impacts of construction or the loss of travel lanes or the loss of parking, a media environment that really highlights controversy. What are the practical information challenges that we have? Do we know where support is publicly? Do we know how to talk to people and communicate with our stakeholders in a way that makes them feel a sense of value and a sense of ownership over the changes that are actually happening? And then also, what are the kinds of technical expertise and gaps that our city staff have in actually delivering this work? There's a lot that goes into project delivery, from a concept standpoint, from a funding standpoint, from a construction standpoint, and what are the opportunities to sort of think about all these groups of stakeholders, what they actually need, and meeting those needs individually rather than typical grant programs, which sometimes are really helpful in certain areas, but don't allow the kinds of flexibility and strategic thinking that sort of makes everyone sort of feel like they're a part of this work. And so, some of the outcomes are in New Orleans during just 24 months of working with them, is they both completed and created a bicycle master plan for the actual city, but then also moved immediately into implementation. And so in the span of 2 years, New Orleans developed an entire plan, moved immediately into construction, and were able to construct 27 miles of brand new bicycle lanes. They had a real focus, not just in New Orleans about building 27 miles, but making sure that they were connected, they were a part of a network, and a large portion of those 27 miles actually went into a historically underserved neighborhood of Algiers. And today you can go there and you can ride on a fully protected bicycle network all over the entire Algiers neighborhood. They did that by rethinking their community engagement strategy, tying community engagement directly into their construction strategy, shrinking the time that it takes between sort of asking people what they want to see in their community and actually delivering on that vision. They were able to, by using the AMP strategies, to really lean into community groups that were already supportive of this work, but didn't have a focused vision or a goal to unite behind. And so under Mayor Cantrell's leadership in New Orleans, they really were able to kickstart some real momentum that continues to this day. The example in Austin is also one, again, they started with a lot of funding. They started with a really knowledgeable staff. They started with some momentum that they had already built up over a decade of implementation, and they were able to double the pace that they were building their bicycle network. And so in just 24 months, they built 115 miles of new bicycle lanes all over the city. It's one of our most largest in terms of mileage accomplishments for cities using the AMP. And really what was really helpful for Austin was a focus on maintaining public support as they were doing these big, bold, ambitious kinds of projects. It was about aligning the the interest of a number of political leaders, helping them develop processes internally that added consistency and predictability to project delivery, so they weren't making up, how they were going to deliver a project every single time with every individual project. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, running a paid media campaign that consistently reminded people in the community that Austin is a growing city, that we're offering new transportation options for people all over the city. And it's good for you, for us to have bicycle lanes, even if you are never actually going to ride a bicycle. It's good to invest in sidewalks if you're always going to be driving a car, creating a value proposition for people to buy into the idea that building infrastructure is good for them, is good for their community, even when they may not actually consider themselves a user of that infrastructure. The ultimate outcome is, not only did Austin build 115 miles of really amazing bicycle lanes and sidewalks throughout the city during those 2 years, but they also went back to the voters and asked them to fund the next round of implementation. And so they successfully passed Proposition G, which provides $460 million for specifically for active transportation infrastructure. And that is a direct result of building this public support, showing that, if the public supports this, the city can actually follow through on building the infrastructure, gaining the public's trust, and be able to sort of think about sort of not just what happens now in this short period of time using the AMP, but how do we use the strategies from the AMP to help sustain us into the future.
Thanks, Kyle. So, AMP, you heard it from us, it works. But where will AMP work? And, from our perspective and seeing the playbook be used across cities in the US, it really has the ability to meet cities, whether it's the elected officials, city staff, or community partners, sort of where they are. We have experience working in cities that have received a lot of federal funding and are ready to begin planning and implementing, to smaller cities that have a smaller population, a potentially more suburban or rural environment, who are also thinking about how to think differently and change the city's streets. And so our encouragement to potential applicants is, the sort of first part of the application process is you need a city staff member and a community partner to help us really identify where each grantee's starting place is, to help us identify sort of what is the potential for investing in mobility networks. We were recently in Milwaukee, who went through this grant program last year. And again, have been able to see just a really diverse population, a new enthusiastic mayor, use the approaches in the playbook to see Mayor Johnson's vision of building 40 miles of his planned bike network over the next few years. And then just earlier today, we were talking to a small city of 50,000 residents who a few years ago didn't think they could identify the local, state, or federal funding to be able to build high quality on street protected bike lanes and sidewalks, and are now about to pass at council an updated budget where they've been able to realign funding at a local level, but also leverage state and federal funding streams to fund the vision of their plan. And so, that bingo card that we saw earlier kind of had a free space for funding, as well as a variety of other barriers. And we just have seen that, with the new partnerships that come out of this program, as well as a new way to potentially think about how you're delivering projects, that, we've got some great examples from communities of all sizes, all geographies, to show sort of how to overcome real challenges like how do you fund, how do you build, how do you pay for the capital costs for cities to achieve, what their goals are. Next slide. And so kind of as we begin to wrap up and get into more of just the actual details of the grant, we just encourage that if you've got questions, to ask us questions here. Kyle, myself, and Zoe are a resource. We want more cities to move faster, listen to residents, change the city streets the way that everyone collectively does. And so we believe the playbook can work for you. And if you have questions on what that specifically looks like, because every community is different, please don't hesitate to ask. Next slide. And so we currently have a grant application open. This grant application closes on November 20th. And so there still is plenty of time to review the application, gather letters of support, ask questions, and kind of make decisions on how you want to move forward. And again, we're here. Next slide. And then a little bit more about kind of what does happen if you are awarded this grant. And so again, as we've stated, this purpose of this grant is to really identify what relationships are working, what plans are in progress or stalled or about to launch, what is the capacity, whether it is financial or staff capacity, to actually begin to build, plan, activate the mobility network that you want to see in your community. And so we do this through a variety of a site visit. It's important for us to really ensure that we get to experience the place that you're from, and also get to meet with key stakeholders in person. And then we use a variety of stakeholder interviews, doom scrolling social media on what positive or negative things are being said in terms of support for initiatives locally, looking at examples of what has been really successful in the city that we can learn from, sort of agnostic to whether it's mobility based or it's a COVID response effort that worked really well, cross collaboration between city departments, and then also meet on a regular basis with the city and community lead to not only ensure that we are talking to the right people, reviewing the right documents, but also begin to build stronger partnerships between city governments and the community partners, and also use our time together to share more about the playbook and our approach, and even provide, lessons learned, some on the spot, coaching, if you will, on what's happening at the time. And then the deliverable, which will happen in June of 2025, will be, our assessment of what's happening. It's never any news. I'm waiting to be able to share hot gossip in a readiness assessment. It hasn't happened yet, but really is a single document of the things that you've said, over coffee with a colleague, but has not actually been collected in one place about what's working well and what has the opportunity to improve. And then based on that assessment, a custom city, local specific roadmap action plan on how not only can you, with your community partner and city partners, identify, an ambitious shared goal to achieve quickly, but also how does community partners, diverse coalitions, all of the strategies that Kyle mentioned in Austin and New Orleans, like what does that cost? How does it work? How does it happen? Is all involved there. And then we also, again, believe that this cohort, these peer cities that we now have the honor of continuing to work with, can learn so much from each other that we will bring folks together later in 2025 to, swap stories, share what's happening on the ground, and learn together. And then we also, consider the folks that go through this program, part of the city thread. I was going to say club, which I've never said out loud before. A great group of people that we want to continue to support in a variety of different ways. Next slide. And then the true brass tacks details, which I've gone over. We have a ton of information. If you go to citythread.com/grants, there's a checklist on the key items that need to be collected in order to submit the application, as well as a FAQ. And again, if any other questions come up, we're about to have the opportunity to answer questions. Next slide. Here we are. So if you've got questions, put them in the chat or use the Q&A feature. I'm just going to move right into our first question from the group. It says, in regards to advocacy, what role does this panel feel the city should play in creating advocacy groups? While we need cheerleaders and supporters, we also don't need yes men for the city who enable poor design. And so from our perspective, the beauty of this grant process is that the community partner and the city lead and all of our assessment helps us really identify where advocacy is really showing up as a partner for the city, but also where there's opportunities to grow a coalition of a variety of advocacy partners who can help not only identify, how does building, 40 miles of their planned biking and walking network in 2 years benefit their needs, but also talk to their constituents around how the 40 miles will benefit public health goals or a neighborhood association goals. And also the coalition is able to work directly with the city to be a supporter, but also be an accountability partner because they're both working towards the same goal. And so we really want the advocacy groups to really come from the community and not necessarily from city government to be able to really have some leverage on the community side, that it is representative and is not just sort of another committee or arm of the city trying to advocate for the work that it has planned. Okay, second question. Kyle, this one is a Kyle question, heads up.
Yeah.
Have these strategies been applied to cross-jurisdictional projects? The cities in my region often have their own bicycle networks, but when crossing city boundaries, you often get dumped out into a dangerous intersection with no bicycle infrastructure.
Yep. The short answer to Michael is yes. And it's not even just at the edge of the boundaries of a city. Within a city's boundaries, there are jurisdictional issues. A state government might own and operate some of the roadways or the intersections, or there's jurisdictional issues with railroads or with other sort of quasi-governmental agencies. That jurisdictional ownership and operation is always a primary issue, and is a way in which all of the cities that we are working in it's also a space on the bingo card about that we're attempting to challenge. And what I would say is that the strategies of the mobility playbook itself are meant to address the bigger picture issues that often sort of surround sort of the complications that can come with that, right? So it doesn't undo the jurisdictional knots that exist in terms of project delivery, but it attempts to get to the heart of the issues that sometimes prevent solutions from coming from those. So we're looking at items like, how are we communicating? What kinds of partners are a part of this? Does everyone have a shared understanding of what we're actually trying to achieve, and how can we grease the wheels on that as well? So my example from both New Orleans and Austin are riddled with individual projects where cross-jurisdictional issues arose on a day-to-day basis. What I would say is sometimes those just take more conversation and they take more intention. The key is to not let all of your other projects stall because you're trying to deal with this one primary issue at one key intersection. There's an opportunity to leverage outside partners to help sort of make those situations grow more. And if in your community, jurisdictional issues were the key, to sort of unlocking, project delivery happening faster, it would become a focus of the recommendations that we would make and would be, factored into, that assessment of what's slowing down projects in your area.
Thanks, Kyle. Next question. Do you have advice on recruiting a good community partner? That's a great question. And yes, we do have advice. We believe that great community partners can come from sort of any interest across the community. We've seen a lot of success in community organizations that are looking at the city comprehensively. So focusing on mobility, housing, job access, groups that have programming and staff and boards that are engaged in a variety of aspects of civic life, if you will. And we find that because our approach is mode agnostic, we're really around how do we actually get this infrastructure built and activate the support around it, that groups with sort of diverse programming are really strong partners. That said, mobility advocates who have been working incredibly hard in our communities are also really good community partners. And for us, it's really just folks that have the kind of capacity and willingness to participate in the program, and also are open to thinking about sort of a more partnership approach relationship with the city. Kyle, anything to add?
No, but the next question kind of just builds on that, so I'll just go straight into that. The question is, does the city have to be the lead applicant, or can a community-based organization be the lead applicant? Where does the local match sort of come from in that regard? And so the city does not have to be the lead applicant. You can, as a community-based organization, drive the application yourself. What we consider to be the applicant, though, is our co-applicants, right? One representative from the city or the municipal government, one representative from a community-based organization. As Sara just mentioned, that's a pretty wide range, right? We've worked in some communities where it's a mobility advocacy group as the community-based organization. We've worked in others where they are working on transit advocacy or housing advocacy or climate justice. There's a range of community-based partners that have an interest in mobility, and so it doesn't have to be, your local bike advocacy group sort of serving in that role. And similarly, in the city, sometimes our municipal partner is a person who works in the Department of Transportation. Other times it's an elected official or a person in a different office who's overseeing sort of innovative solutions to communities. And so it's not so much for us about it's not as important about who's actually a part of the lead applicants, only that they're actually being named one community partner and one municipal staffer who is going to join us and be a part of this work together. Likewise, it doesn't matter to us where the local match comes from. I would say our local matches come 50-50 in all the cities that we work in. Some of them come from the municipal government. Some of them come from local organizations or local philanthropic funders who are providing the funding in addition to supporting the entire application. So there's a lot of flexibility in there for us to be able to accept applications of all kinds.
Thanks. Next question. Besides biking, what other examples of accessibility, infrastructure, or advocacy capacity growth have you seen be successful in this type of program, even beyond transportation, but also housing zoning, education, enforcement concerns, et cetera? So for this specific grant, we have been really focused on infrastructure implementation goals. And so in terms of cities that have moved through this phase of the playbook, we, and Kyle, you can add on. I'd say it's been very, very infrastructure focused, but we do now see and are working with a few cities in the US about taking their readiness assessment and their action plan and applying it to housing, accessible housing, retrofitting, and new development, as well as some look at shelters. But again, a lot of our sort of focus with the current grantees has been around how to build infrastructure and activate the support to continue to build infrastructure. Kyle, anything to add?
No, that's precisely right. This specific grant opportunity is mobility focused, and so we tend to get respondents and applications from cities who are challenged by implementing their sort of planned mobility plans. But as Sarah mentioned, we are using the playbook strategies in other ways. In one community, we started off thinking about mobility. That's now transitioned to housing, and so we're using the same strategies that we would use to build relationships and partnerships around getting, trails built or getting sidewalks built. We're now using those same kind of strategies to help them think about the affordable housing developments that the city is leading on, and getting those built faster. We're also, working in some communities right now who don't really know if they want to invest a lot of time in mobility or housing or parks or public space. They're not quite sure, what they actually want to do. But we are using the same playbook and the same strategy and the same system to not only help them develop those strategies, but to identify what their key priorities actually are. And so this specific grant opportunity is mobility focused. And so the applications that we'll be looking for, should be mobility focused in that regard. But to answer your general question, the answer is yes, we're involved in other sort of place-based infrastructure and programs in cities utilizing a very similar framework as this.
And then a question from the chat. Could these funds be used to put together an educational program that would help create a culture of road safety by providing individuals and communities with the knowledge and skills to make safer road choices? And then for this grant, the deliverable, as a technical assistance grant, the deliverable is the action plan, the roadmap, as well as the travel and experience of attending the convening. And then I would just also add that there are a lot of really amazing behavior change, culture shift programs. The League of American Bicyclists is a close partner of ours, but our focus has been really around activating support, again, for the mobility infrastructure. And so we don't currently sort of work in the space of changing culture. We believe that infrastructure is really important to changing culture. And so are really directly focused on building safe places, making the case to people who drive their cars and may always drive their cars, whether by choice or necessity, that a protected high quality bike lane or a crosswalk or a safe intersection benefits them as a car user because it makes their drive more comfortable, more convenient, less confusing, and more safe. All right, the fun time of, is there any other questions? Amazing. Well, you know how to get in touch with us via this slide. We have also recorded this informational webinar, and we'll be sharing that out with everyone that attended and everyone that registered. So again, I know that we all are busy and have a lot of things on our lists. And so Kyle, Zoe, and I really appreciate the folks that attended and participated and asked really thoughtful questions. And we hope to be hearing from those of you that are interested in applying.
Yeah, Sarah,
Thanks, y'all.
I would just end by saying that, we're really looking forward to chatting with you all more about the opportunity. Like we've mentioned several times, there's no real limitations in terms of where you are today about whether you can apply. If you've got a brand new transportation master plan and you're thinking about how to implement it, this program is right for you. If you aren't even quite sure what you are thinking about related to mobility, this program is right for you. And it doesn't matter if you are, feeling really confident about your ability to deliver projects, or if you're really nervous about delivering projects. The AMP and this technical assistance outlines an implementation strategy that isn't solely focused on, the nuts and bolts of project delivery. It's really focused on building partnerships that will allow project delivery to happen much faster, much more efficiently, and building those partnerships and those relationships in a way that sustains momentum well beyond the initial act of getting projects going. And we're seeing it happen in cities over and over and over again. And if you are at all considering, being a part of our next group of cities, please submit an application. We've made it as easy as possible to submit an application. It's As a former government employee, I know what it takes to submit some of these applications, and it's a real doozy. And so we tried really hard to make it as easy as possible. The one, sort of key requirement again is that you have one community-based partner and one municipally based partner. That's the real measure of detailed hardcore requirements that we have on the application. Everything else is just sort of telling us about sort of where you are today, where you hope to be, and how you think the program can actually help you. So if you do have any questions, we have a little more than a month before applications are due, and our team is ready and willing to chat more about what AMP could do for you if you have any of those questions.
Thanks, Kyle. Great final words. And while Zoe is not here, she also has immense experience in grant writing. And so there couldn't be a better person to help write a grant for City Thread than Zoe Kirkus, who helps guide Kyle and I as well. Again, thank you. We hope to hear from as many of you as are interested. And I hope everyone has a great rest of the day. Meeting adjourned.